and we're waiting for our page to load, which comes back to our code. And you can see now that the student age variable is waiting to be set to that property setting of 40. This is our page load variable. This is our class object and its property. And when I step past that line of code, very suspenseful, I know, but when you step past that line of code, it's now 40 in both places. So it came down, it ran the set statement. Oh, let me step back a minute, I apologize. Right here, where we say myStudent.age equals 40, that invoked the object set statement, which set its variable equal to whatever was passed in, which in this case was 40. And then in the very next line, our variable in this routine was set equal to that object value. So we took the 40 and we put it in this variable here. In real life, you wouldn't have all this in one sequence of code, but we're just illustrating how you play with the object. So that's properties. We've now looked at properties. I'm going to stop debugging. We're going to look at methods. So a method is just a capability that you would give to a class. And in this simple example, it's hard to think of what practical method we give to this student. So let's just say that we want to have, it's sort of a silly method, but what we'll define, and we'll just put here a method to display the age in a sentence. So I'm going to define something that's going to look very much like any other function. It's going to be public, meaning that it's available out to someone who uses this class. If I made it private, it would only be available to class code itself. So like it will be a function that only the property code could deal with or something like that. But we make it public, which means I can use it for my page load event. So when I have public, and I'll just say output age in sentence, a really silly, pointless method. And then just like any function, I have a code block. And you can see that means must have a return type. So I have to actually say public string output age in sentence. And now it'll give a different warning about not all code paths return a value, which means there's no code defined. It doesn't do anything. It's just there. The parenthesis, of course, is where you could input a parameter. Like I could put, and well down I'll just put string, let's say string full name. And that's an input parameter to the method. So now what I'll do is I'll create another variable, and I'll call this string sentence equals, and I'll concatenate. I'll say full name, and I'll use the plus sign to concatenate more than one string together, and I'll use my quotes, and I'll type is, and quotes, and a plus sign again. And then I'll use the age variable, which is available to this method because, if you recall, it was defined for the entire class to be private to the class. So inside this class, anywhere I work, I can rely on getting that variable. And what I'll do is I'll put is plus underbar age. And to make it into a true usable string, I need to use the toString method. And then I'll put another plus sign, and I'll put years old and a semicolon. So I just defined a string variable, and I could put it on two lines. I could say string underbar sentence, and then put underbar sentence, if that's easier to follow. Sentence equals the input parameter, a text phrase, the age property, another text phrase, and that turns into a string. So all that's left to do is to return it back to whoever called this method. So I type return underbar sentence. And we're covering the basic principles of interacting with this function. So we now have a function which is treated as a method of this class. So the student class now has a output age in sentence method. And I can see that if I go back to my code, I have my object defined here. And on this line, I can look at how my student, and I hit the period, now has a method called output age in sentence. And you can see from the IntelliSense here that it'll give me back a string. And it needs a parameter of full name. So that means I need to find another variable. And I'll put this, and I'll call, let's say, string my sentence. And then my sentence. And again, you usually put this all in one line, like you'd equal it. But I'm just trying to hopefully make it more understandable as we build this gradually. String my sentence. So my sentence equals, my object definition of my student, which is an instance of the student class that we define below, my student.output age and sentence, and I have to put something in here. So I'll put Joe Smith. It's just a string, that's all it wants. And then I don't really need this line here. And I'll put my breakpoint on my sentence, and we'll run our application. And you can see that the breakpoint we defined stops on this line where the mySentence variable is being set to the myStudentObject's output age and sentence method output value. That's a lot in one sentence I just said there. But we'll just break this down briefly. So right now it's null. There's nothing in that string. When I step into the code, you can see I'm actually in the method of the class. I went from being in the pageLoad event handler, which is right here. That's the pageLoad event handler. It skipped me down into this other class, which is defined at the same level in the hierarchy as the class example. So you see how I have public partial class class example in brackets, and I have public class student all at the same level. They both have their code blocks. That's what that is. That's a code block for the class. But back to what I was saying, we're in the output age and sentence method. That's why the pointer's here. And I can step through it and work that code works, and it comes back out of the class, back into the load handler, and it defines that variable, and there it is. Joe Smith is 40 years old. And I did all that just by making a homemade personal class with local variables to store data, property handler to set and get a property value, and a method to do whatever I'd like it to do. And in this case, I'd like it to take an input parameter, to give back a string, to work with another property value. All that's totally my choice, the way I'd like to structure this. So I hope that helped to appreciate the basic way you work with classes to enhance and expand your capabilities in C#. Thanks again, and goodbye.